Hello, this is the Chris Meyer Podcast. Today's episode is a very personal one for me. When I was 7 years old, my parents dropped me off at a police station with the suitcase. That moment shaped the course of my life. Today, I'm a family law attorney, and much of my work helps families through crisis, conflict, and change. Over time, I've tried to understand how complicated family decisions can be and how different the same story can look depending on where you are standing. So today, for the first time, I'm sitting down with my mother to hear her perspective about what happened back then in 1989. What life looked like from her side and what she was experiencing at the time. Mom, thank you for being willing to have this conversation. But before we get into anything difficult or historical, could you please introduce yourself in your own words and tell listeners a little bit about who you are?
My name is Mary Alice. My maiden name was Abernathy, and my married name is Meyer, Mary Alice Abernathy Meyer. I'm from Alabama. I do have a southern accent. My father was the hardest working man I ever knew. My parents bought 23 acres in semi-rural area in Jefferson County, Alabama, in driving distance of the steel mill in Fairfield. My father worked at the steel mill almost all his life. He came home and did farm work until almost dark. And he took his vacation time from the steel mill and worked as a night watchman at the state fair. So even though he was the hardest working man I ever knew, I never once thought of him as disabled, yet he was exempt from military service because of a crushed leg he got when he was a teenager. Otherwise, he would have been eligible for World War I and World War II. But working at the steel mill was considered a wartime effort. And my mother, during wartime, worked as a welder. You've heard that women went to work, housewives went to work to help the war effort, and that really happened. One of the most distinctive things about myself is that my father was born in 1896. He was 48 years old when I was born. His parents were both born in 1854. So my grandparents were born more than 170 years ago. I am 81 years old now, and I'm happy to accept your invitation to talk about what happened in 1989, Christopher.
Thank you, Mom. Just a question, just a little history about the family. Where do we come from, and where did we land?
I have been interested in family history and genealogy since before I could read and write. I would sit at my father's knees and have a piece of paper and a pencil where I would scribble down names, even though I didn't know how to write yet, hadn't been to school yet. And I would say, Daddy, tell me the names of your brothers and sisters, starting with the oldest. And he'd say, well, Bob was the oldest, then there was Jim. And I'd scribble. And I was fascinated by all that. And I've spent a lot of time on genealogy. The Abernathys are supposed to be Scotch-Irish. That's a term that means nothing in Europe, but to us Americans, it means people who are 100% by blood from Scotland, but they came to the United States from Ireland, so we call them Scotch-Irish. The Abernathy name is supposed to come from the Nethy River in Scotland, and I can't wait to go to Scotland and see the Nethy River. My mother's maiden name was Powell, which is supposed to be a Welsh name, but I've not been able to get any of the immigrant ancestors' names except possibly 2 out of 16 great-great-grandparents' surnames. So I'm still actively working on all that. My Abernathy progenitor came from Newberry County, South Carolina, And there was a lady who married an Abernathy whose last name was Creed, C-R-E-E-D. She came from Surry County, North Carolina. And all of you are familiar with Surry County, North Carolina, because that's where Andy Griffith came from, the fictional town of Mayberry. There's another reason that county is famous, and that's because Siamese twins settled there, did farm work. They married 2 women and had 2 homes and 2 sets of children, although they were conjoined. But they thought that was one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's just south of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, and it is very beautiful. On my mother's side, I have ancestors from the part of Caswell County, North Carolina, that became Person County, North Carolina. So on my father's side, Surry County, North Carolina, and on my mother's side, Person County, North Carolina, both of those counties border Virginia. So I'm still working on the family history. They did not come through the port of Charleston to South Carolina. They came to Pennsylvania, then down through Virginia, and worked their way down to South Carolina. So I'm still working on that.
Okay, what about my father's side? Where is his family from, and how did they land here?
The 4 grandparents of my husband were all born in Germany. One of them, or some of them, lived in Iowa. And my husband's grandfather sold farm equipment. It was called McCormick Reaper. I think it's something like a combine to harvest wheat. But his wife was not in good health, and he thought she had TB. So, sight unseen, he bought land in Florida near Ocala. 3 times the orange grove froze out, and they decided to leave. His wife's health had not improved in sunny Florida, and he already had relatives in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But my children's grandfather, Meyer, was born there in Florida near Ocala in 1890, and his older sister remembers the sound of alligators in the river. And then, as now, they have glass-bottom boats and tourists in that area near Ocala. So in Chattanooga, they settled down, and my children's grandfather, Meyer, served in World War I, not World War II. He was on the front lines of France in World War I. He was a farmer. He got married, and they had 3 daughters, 2 sons, and another son that died that was stillborn or died shortly after birth. My husband said he was greatly distressed to learn about his baby brother that had died, and he asked his mother why, or why would God allow this, or why did it happen medically, just why. Yeah. And she just said it was God's will. And he got a graduate degree, a master's degree in theology, also a master's degree in physics. But he was never satisfied with that answer about why his baby brother died. And I'm not sure any theologian has a good answer for that.
What age did his brother die?
It was before, the baby brother would have been older than him. He was born in 1936, and they had one more baby after him, your Aunt Louise.
Was it a miscarriage?
The baby that died was either stillborn or died shortly after birth.
Okay.
So there was a daughter and a son. That was Betty and Gussie, and then Mary, and then Cliff, and then Louise. So there were 5 plus the one that died as a baby. So
you have the Scott heritage, and my father has the German heritage?
Yes, I've always told the children they're half German. And I wanted to say that my children's grandfather, Meyer, was a truck farmer.
Mm-hmm.
He grew a lot of vegetables, maybe collards or turnip greens, and he would take the vegetables by pickup truck into Chattanooga and sell them to supermarkets. so he was considered a truck farmer. So you might say my children's father was a farm boy, but he went to a large high school in Chattanooga, so I think he experienced both rural and urban life.
Okay, and I guess how did you guys meet? Where did you meet?
I went to a small college that became a university while I was there in Northeast Alabama. When my husband-to-be got his bachelor's degree in engineering physics, he came to my college for his first teaching job. And I want to mention that he worked full-time and went to college at night 9 years to get his bachelor's degree in engineering physics. He was very smart. He was a very good draftsman. He did design drafting. He was a design draftsman for Tennessee Highway Department. Can I talk about his military experience now?
Yeah, no, that's fine. But both of you are I guess both sides of the family come from the Appalachian Mountains, the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Would that be correct, or?
No, I've never been told that. My Abernathy ancestors came from Surrey County, Newberry County, South Carolina, and the one who was my ancestor, Samuel Abernathy, migrated to Chambers County, Alabama, where my father was born in 1896. In 1900, my grandfather Abernathy moved his family to Chilton County, Alabama, which is between Birmingham and Montgomery. Chattanooga is between Signal Mountain and Lookout Mountain, I believe, but I've never been told that we were from the
But it's not part of the greater mountain chain, would you say?
Well, Northeast Alabama is in the foothills of the Appalachians, where I went to college, but I don't know. I guess I'd have to look at a topographical map to answer that question. But I've never been told we were from the Appalachians.
But father was also from where he grew up in Georgia. That was also the foothills of the Lookout Mountain.
Who was from there?
Clifford, my father, where he lived in Georgia.
No, he was from Chattanooga, but they had land in northwest Georgia.
Yeah,
that's correct. And that's where your Aunt Louise settled.
Okay. So, Tennessee, northern Georgia.
I guess it was farmland that he farmed, but they lived in Chattanooga. That was in northwest
A very mountainous area.
Very beautiful.
Very beautiful. Okay, so and then how did we meet again? And tell me about the military service, or what you.
When my husband-to-be got his bachelor's degree in engineering physics, his first job was teaching freshman engineering courses at the college where I was a student. It became a university while I was there. I worked I had a job on campus working for the science department, and he was a teacher in the science departments, the science building. So we saw each other there and met each other and started dating. He was taking a graduate course in education, and he hired me to type his term papers, and he was very happy with my work. I would also correct any grammatical errors as I typed paper. And afterward, he invited me out to eat, and I thought it was just, I'm happy with the work, I'll take you out to eat. But about the third time when we went out to eat, I thought, this must be a date.
Yeah, right.
So eventually, that was in the mid-1960s, and we met again in about 1968. He became a tenured professor at Gadsden State Junior College, where he developed the electronic technology program. After 2 years, his students would go out and make more money than he did, and this is when he had a master's degree in physics.
Wow.
So we got married in 1969, but I want to go back to my husband after he graduated. He went to Lutheran Parochial School in Chattanooga. Then he went to Central High School in Chattanooga. And after high school, he joined the military. And he was in the Navy, in the part of the Navy they call Seabees. it's my understanding that they did not have Navy SEALs at that time, but his military training included the training that Navy SEALs get today.
Wow.
They were excited, his group was excited that they were going to get on a ship. They were in Hueneme, California. They were going to get on a ship and go to the North Pole. I would not be excited if I were told I'm going to go on a ship to the North Pole, but he and his group were very excited about that. But there was a national crisis, and the President of the United States had something special in mind that he wanted to do, and he wanted my husband and his group to do it. It was a dangerous military activity overseas that would involve the swimming skills they had. And at Port Hueneme, California, according to my husband's recollection, there was a mutiny. He had a very bad traumatic experience, and he did not get into trouble because he did what he did following orders, but we understand the base commander did get into trouble for issuing the orders he did. My husband, as a result of that incident, wound up in the early 1950s in psychiatric care. After that, he got an honorable discharge. He also got a 100% lifetime service-connected disability rating.
I saw that those documents.
According to my memory of what he said, he voluntarily gave up his pension when he was about 20 because he wanted to be normal. He did not want to be dependent on the government. So he worked full-time for 9 years, went to college at night, got his BS in engineering physics. Then he got his master's degree in physics from the University of Chattanooga, which is now University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, in 1968. For several years, he attended National Science Foundation summer institutes for college science teachers. After he got his master's degree in physics in 1968, he immediately went to Berkeley to Lawrence Radiation Labs for that summer. In 1969, he did one of those institutes at Vanderbilt in Nashville. And after we got married in August of 1969, he did another one right after our honeymoon at Trinity in San Antonio, Texas. That was the reason we first went to Texas A&M University. He did one of those summer institutes in 1970, studying cosmic rays. And for a reason that I don't understand because I'm not a physicist, to study cosmic rays, which is radiation that passes all the way through the earth. They go down into salt mines to study cosmic rays.
Wow.
I have another son who graduated with honors in physics, so I'll have to ask him why they go down into salt mines. But anyway, my husband very much wanted to be normal. He got that BS in engineering physics, master's degree in physics. He was a tenured professor at Gadsden State Junior College, where he developed a very successful program in electronic technology. About a year after we were married, he felt led to become a minister, and he wanted to go to seminary. So in 1971, we moved to Texas, and that's why all of our children are Texans, even though I'm from Alabama and my husband's from Tennessee. So in Texas, he did another summer institute in Lubbock, Texas, where he actually developed some kind of heart monitoring device that would be useful to first responders. But he had a mental conflict, an ethical concern about keeping people alive if they were only going to be in a vegetative state the rest of their lives, and he did not want to bring that device to market. So I think other people did, but he did successfully develop such a device. Then he started seminary studies in Fort Worth, Texas, and we lived in Fort Worth. And 3 years later, he graduated with a Master of Divinity degree, which is the basic theology degree. So he had master's degrees in both physics and theology. After that, his professors were going to be tour guides for a Mediterranean cruise that would include Israel. Well, all our nights were spent on the ship, except one night at a hotel in Jerusalem. It was a wonderful trip. On our 5th anniversary, we were riding camels up to the pyramids in Egypt. We visited several different countries and several Greek islands, including Patmos, where the book of Revelation and the Bible was written. And then coming back, we had quite an adventure because that was the summer when the Greeks and the Turks were at war over the island of Cyprus. And when we got back to Athens to fly out, they had closed the airport the day before because of the war. So our ship sailed to Brindisi, Italy, and we flew from there back home. Our refueling stop was in Maine, and when I called my mother from Maine, I thought she would have been so worried about us being over there during wartime, but she had not paid much attention to the news about that. But she knew that Bangor, Maine was a long way from Birmingham, Alabama, and she worried more about us getting from Bangor, Maine back to Dallas, Texas, than she did the international trip we were on. So that was a wonderful trip. So back to the basics. We were married 10 years before we started having babies. My bachelor's degree was in medical technology. I worked in hospital laboratories and blood banks. I was able to work full-time while my husband was a full-time seminary student for 3 years. I was looking forward to the role reversal where the husband earns a living and the wife works if she wants to. But after that, my husband said, honey, what I really want to do is go back to Texas A&M and get a PhD in physics. So again, I worked at hospital laboratories and I worked full-time so that he could be a full-time student. He did work as a teaching assistant in both math and physics departments and earned maybe $300 a month. And I had a stipend from my graduate program. I worked on a master's degree in education, and I got about $300 a month. So for 1 year in 1975, we were both full-time graduate students. But other than that, I worked full-time so that he could be a full-time student. And we thought we were putting off having babies until Cliff was not a student anymore. But that went on and on and on. And as it turned out, we were married 10 years before we started having babies. We were overjoyed when God blessed us with a beautiful daughter in 1980. We were overjoyed when God blessed us with a wonderful son, Christopher, in 1981. Unfortunately, I had a miscarriage in 1982, but God blessed us with another fine son in 1983. So here we are. I had my first baby when I was 35 and Cliff was 44. And by the time he was 50, he had one in kindergarten and 2 little boys who were toddlers. Those were very busy years for us. And in 1981, I remember going to counseling because I was worried about my husband. I realized he was suffering from some form of depression, but I didn't know much about depression and I couldn't figure out what was going on.
In 1981?
Yes, while I was pregnant with you. I went to a counselor and I wanted to find out how I could help my husband. And the counselor said, your husband will get helped when he gets ready to get helped, but you're right here in front of me, I can help you. So it continued the problems continued to escalate. The first 5 years of our marriage, I hardly knew there was anything wrong with my husband. There were a few incidents that made me wonder what was happening. But then the second 5 years of our marriage, I knew something was wrong. And then after the children came along, it seems that his mental illness returned. He became abusive to me. but I want to emphasize the plain truth of the matter. He was a wonderful daddy. He loved his children. He spent a lot of time with them. He loved every minute of it. He had no classes on Fridays, but I worked at the university, and my job was Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So a lot of times he would not take the children to the babysitter on Fridays. He would keep them all day. And sometimes he would keep them in the mornings. His first class was in the afternoon. He could drop the children off at the babysitters at 11. They could eat lunch there. Then he could go eat lunch and get ready for his afternoon classes. He would come home after an early evening class. It would be time for supper. And then he was very, very tired. This is when we had 3 preschoolers. I was very tired after working 8 to 5. I would come home and immediately have supper ready, and we would eat supper as soon as Cliff got home. I needed a burst of energy after that, which I didn't get. My husband was totally collapsed from exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I had no help in the evenings with washing dishes or getting children ready for bathed and ready for bed and all that. And one of my children liked to stay up late. He was wide awake until midnight. Well, you can't tell a 3-year-old, just play with your toys and go to bed when you get sleepy, because he was old enough, he could be out the door and down the street. So one of the parents had to stay up with him, and that was me. And I loved spending the time with him, but that made me more exhausted because I had to get up early the next morning and go to work. So these were stressful times. The time that Christopher mentioned in 1989, he said his parents dropped him off at a police station with a suitcase. There is a core of truth to that, and I want to explain, as he asked me to do from my perspective. 1989, you could say, was a continuation of crises and conundrums that possibly culminated with my husband's unexpected death in 1991.
Well, could you tell me what were the biggest stresses or pressures you were dealing with at the time?
In 1989?
Yeah.
I became too depressed to work, although I had worked at the university for 9 years. I had to quit my job. That was very early in 1989. And then the children were taken at the end of March in 1989. And what happened before that was that we were getting marriage counseling. My husband had finally come to the point that he was willing to get professional help in 1985. And he did get psychiatric care. And the good news is that the medication that was prescribed worked well. And the bad news is he did not stay on it, because when he felt better, he thought he didn't need it anymore. So his condition did not improve very much. In fact, it got worse.
What do you remember feeling during that season of your life?
I was very frustrated and tired, exhausted, and experienced depression myself, trying to figure out how to help my husband. He did become abusive to me. He was a wonderful daddy. I want to say that over and over.
Of course.
He was a wonderful daddy, absolutely, 100%. I do want to emphasize that. So we were getting professional help with marriage counseling and psychologists. One of our children had a hair-trigger temper. We had him evaluated by a child psychologist when he was still 3 years old, almost 4. And one of the really good things that came out of that was that the psychologist recommended speech therapy. And the job of a 3 and 4-year-old is to ask questions. And this child was not getting answers, not because we ignored him, but because we couldn't understand what he said. He jabbered.
Makes sense.
And the psychologist realized he had an articulation defect. I don't like the word defect, but I think that's what they called it. So he recommended speech therapy, and we were able to get this one child into speech therapy 2 years before kindergarten and 2 years after he started kindergarten, and that completely wiped out the problem. and he absolutely has no speech difficulties at all. But he was a very frustrated child because he was very smart and he didn't get the answers to his questions. He had very good questions that we couldn't understand. But he was a wonderful child, very smart. In fact, all three children were very smart, and I attribute that to the fact that they got good German genes from their father's side.
Well,
So it was a very tumultuous time in our lives.
what do you think, when you think back to that decision to go to the police station, what do you remember about how that decision developed?
I was already seeing a Christian counselor, and I told her that I had come to the conclusion that two of the children were not safe in the home because the third child, one of the children, had a hair trigger temper and could hurt them and had hurt them. So when I said that to her, she said, well, if you think two of the children are not safe in the home, I'll have to involve the social workers. And at first I thought, that's a good idea. They can probably help me. And the reason I said that is I needed another psychological evaluation when the child with the hair trigger temper was about 5 years old. But at that time, when I worked at the university, they said we could switch from regular medical insurance to an HMO. If we didn't like the HMO, we could switch back to regular medical insurance. And I did that. The thing I don't remember hearing is that when you did that, the medical insurance did not pay pre-existing conditions for a year. So that meant I had insurance, but I did not have insurance.
Yeah.
And we needed insurance for the whole family. We had 3 in pediatrics. The parents had marriage counseling. My husband was seeing a psychiatrist. Because of my depression, I was seeing a psychiatrist. So we needed that medical insurance, and I thought perhaps I could arrange some kind of evaluation, and I got on the phone and tried real hard, but when they found out we didn't have insurance, in effect, we had insurance, but in effect we did not have insurance. Nobody wanted to talk to me.
So do you think it was also kind of more like a systemic issue happening at the time? I mean, a lot of families didn't have access to insurance and hard to access mental health resources and things like that, especially for the children, if the insurance company's not working with you. I mean, do you think that's like just part anecdotal evidence of
I
something
don't know.
larger?
What happened to us was switching from medical insurance to an HMO because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
Then they said we could go back to medical insurance, which I did. The doctors were recommending that because we needed more coverage than the HMO could give us. But then I was in the quagmire of insurance, but no insurance because they wouldn't pay pre-existing conditions for a year. So it was a bad situation. MHMR told me 3 times, we do not serve children, period.
What options did you feel you had at the time?
MHMR. That's where you go if you need psychiatric care and you don't have money or you don't have insurance. But they said 3 times, we do not serve children. So when the Christian counselor said the social workers would get involved, I thought they could help me. And in a way, I was right. And in another way, I was extremely very wrong. The reason I said I was right is that when they got involved, the psychiatrist that MHMR evaluated the child that had the hair trigger temper the same day and recommended immediate placement in a residential treatment facility. That's the day when the social workers took all 3 children, to the total shock of me and my husband. So when I say...
That was at the police station?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where the social workers did their paperwork in a little room with a policeman standing there wearing a gun.
Yeah.
Just to make sure nobody got out of control because they were so angry about what was going on. So it was a calm... Of course, we had rage underneath our calm, but Christopher he has the core information correct that the social workers did their paperwork at the police station. And I don't remember about the suitcase, but it sounds reasonable. or at first they went to the place where abused children are taken, all three of the children, and perhaps they told us in a few days to pack a suitcase to each one. I don't remember, but that's the way Christopher remembers it. So now I want to go back to what happened the Saturday before the children were taken. On that Saturday, my husband and I saw a PhD psychologist for marriage counseling. I was there. I know what my husband said. I heard it with my own ears. He was telling the counselor that he came from a military family. He felt very patriotic. His grandfather was in the Civil War. My husband's father was on the front lines in France in World War I. I don't mean World War II. I do mean World War I.
Yeah.
And my husband said that he had been in the military and that if his country called him to serve again, he would go. And if he mentioned anything about being trained to be a killer, it was in the context of military training. So I don't know if the psychologist misquoted my husband or if the social workers misquoted the psychologist. But in the document that the social workers presented to the judge after they took the children at the ex parte hearing, and I want to mention parenthetically that ex parte hearings are illegal in all 50 states.
It is illegal to. I am a licensed attorney in Texas. I can only speak for Texas. And it is illegal to have an ex parte communication with the judge. What that means is you're having a communication with the judge without the other party present. So hence ex parte. Now, sometimes the court, sometimes entities, agencies, people need immediate relief, so they submit an affidavit to the court. In their petition, they're specifically requesting an ex parte hearing because they don't have enough time to get all the parties into the courtroom, so they're asking for emergency relief. But the other side, the respondents would have a right to a hearing within 2 weeks, and the judge can deny extending this emergency order. So, but it sounds like whatever went into the affidavit you're telling me was not correct and highly prejudicial?
Well, the social workers can do what they do. Then they go before a judge and he gives them permission to do what they've already done. And that is an ex parte hearing, which is illegal in all 50 states, but in child abuse cases, that's what they do. Now, I want to say something about it being a child abuse case. When we finally got to court, they were not accusing the parents of anything. So it might be a very strange child abuse case, but I'll explain that later in a minute. But in this document that they presented to the judge, after they had taken the children at this ex parte hearing, where the judge gives them permission to do what they've already done, they presented a document, I suppose it's an affidavit, in which, as I said, I don't know if the psychologist misquoted my husband or if the social workers misquoted the psychologist or what they read in his report. But in this document presented to the judge, it said, no military context, no context about anything. It said, Mr. Meyer said, I am a trained killer and I will kill again. If he had said anything like that, it was in the context of saying that he had had military training. So,
yeah, I can see how that could influence the judge.
And in my opinion, my experience with the social workers, I cooperated with them at first, but I soon became disillusioned with their system, and I felt betrayed by them.
Was there anything you wish people around you had understood about what you were going through?
Well, of course, people think if you have your children taken away from you that the parents have been abusing their children, which was not the case. We had a sibling-to-sibling issue. So when we finally got to court a year later, and by the way, that first hearing after the ex parte hearing has to happen within 10 days.
Yeah.
Ours did not because of scheduling or whatever, but the law states it has to happen within 10 days. At that time, by legal precedent or protocol, the other side goes first. Our attorney charged $1,000 a day in court. We could come up with $1,000 only one time. And I want to explain that. We bought a home in 1982 when Christopher was a baby. Our first child turned 2 soon after that. We had a small note and a large note. Our financial goal was to pay off the small note and refinance the big note. We wanted to do it in 5 years, but it took us 6 years. And we did that in 1988. We put all our money into the home. The situation with the social workers and the judge and the legal system happened in 1989. And at that time, we could come up with $1,000 free and clear above it, our expenses only one time. And by legal protocol, the other side went first, and after one day, they weren't finished. So that ended that for them. And when we finally got to court a year later, they were not accusing the parents of anything. The question that went to the jury was, would returning these children to their parents have a negative impact on their emotional development? They had had experts and experts and experts on the witness stand because they are the experts that we had consulted for our medical issues and psychological issues. And the experts said, yes. Our lawyers asked them, would pulling these children away from their loving parents have a negative impact on their emotional development? And the experts said yes, but that was not the question that went to the jury. Sometime during the next 3 years, I had an opportunity to testify before a committee or a subcommittee of the state legislature in Austin, and I brought that point to their attention. And I was overjoyed. Finally, 3.5 years after the children were taken, I did get the children back, and I praise God for that. And the reason that I could get back into court and try to get my children back was the untimely, unfortunate, tragic death of my husband in January 1991. He was a tenured professor at a junior college. He was diabetic and he liked to walk. It was the first day of a new semester. He had worked all day the day before as a faculty advisor at registration. On a Tuesday morning, the first day of the new semester, it was early morning before daylight, a few minutes before 7 a.m. He was crossing a major thoroughfare by walking across. A pickup truck had a fogged up windshield. It was raining. And my husband was in a pedestrian accident and struck and killed at age 55.
Where were your kids at the time?
What?
Where were the children at the time?
The children were still in foster care at that time.
Yeah.
And I would not have been able to get back into court unless there had been a major change. And of course, the death of my husband was a major change.
Yeah.
So I was able to get back into court. I had tried to get medical insurance, and a psychiatrist had written on a form that I was no longer depressed. When I showed that to my lawyer, he thought, well, if he'll get on the witness stand and testify to that, we could work on this. And one thing I want to go back and say about that trial, there was an ad litem attorney, a lady. Her husband got a job transfer and she moved soon after she was on our case. And then a new ad litem attorney was appointed. He happened to be a cousin of the foster mother. He told the judge in open court and asked to be relieved of his duties because he thought that constituted something that could be interpreted as a conflict of interest. But the judge would not release him. He just told him to do his job. It was interesting to me that in open court, this ad litem attorney stood up and said to the judge in open court that after an extensive study of case law, he had no idea what he was supposed to do. Well, I figured it out. The law says the case is to be decided on what's best for the children. The ad litem attorney is supposed to report to the judge and the jury what do the children want. And of course the children wanted to come home.
Yeah.
And one of the way it works is that the judge's orders have precedence over social workers' rules.
No, absolutely.
But if there's not a specific judge order on a specific issue, they make their own rules. And one of the rules that the social workers tried to enforce was that when we had visits with the children, a firm rule was do not discuss the case. Now, of course, our children would ask us questions. When can we come home? So I brought it up in open court to the judge. I said, please let us at least answer their questions.
Yeah.
And the judge granted that. And I'm so happy that he did. So I want to emphasize that if there's ever any impression that my husband and I didn't love our children anymore, couldn't put up with them anymore, didn't want them anymore, that is absolutely 100% false. As far as East is from the West, that is not the truth.
Love is not at issue. I mean, it sounds like there are other things at issue that were putting you and your husband under immense pressure. Other things are at issue, but love itself, I don't think anybody disputes that. Parents love their children. But I do want to ask you, did you feel like you had help available, or do you feel like you're mostly alone during this time?
I continued to get the medical care and psychological care that I needed, and I took the medicine that was prescribed, and I did get over the depression. And after my husband died, one of the psychiatrists wrote that it was hard for them to pin down what type of depression I had during the time I had it, but after my husband died, one of the experts wrote in retrospect that my diagnosis was stress reaction.
Now, it sounds like you were under a lot of stress.
I was.
Now, I do want to know, when you look back today, what stands out most to you about that? What stands out most to you about that time?
It's horrible. The worst thing you can do is take children away from their mother. I was in a support group for mothers who had had their children taken away. And the mothers go downhill fast when the children are taken away for whatever reason. And I do want to mention one thing about the finances of this whole thing. And I want to mention that, in my opinion, the social workers twisted many, many, many things that they thought were facts. But the thing I wanted to mention about our finances, after I worked at the university for 9 years, I got a refund from Texas Teacher Retirement because to be eligible for their pension, you have to work 10 years.
Yeah. And
I'd worked more than 9 years, but fewer than 10 years. So I got a refund check for $10,000. My husband at the time also paid into Texas Teacher Retirement, but at the junior college they changed their retirement program system, and he got a refund check from Texas Teacher Retirement for about $10,000. And I want to mention that both of us used every penny of both of those checks to pay lawyers. And I want to mention this kind of circumstance can be so devastating to other parents who have their children removed unjustly. What ordinary family has $20,000 lying around that they don't need, that they can use to hire lawyers.
Most Texans are poor, and sounds like they were poor back in the 80s, the 90s. A lot of Texans are still poor today.
Well, my husband and I both had good jobs.
And imagine what it was like for people who did not.
Or just one.
Is there anything you would like? Is there anything you would want people listening, especially parents who are struggling, to understand from your experience?
Trust God. That's the only thing you can do.
Amen.
And I'm just so thankful that I did get my children back.
Well,
They each found a way to get themselves educated, and I now have 2 lawyers and a physics teacher.
yeah.
So I'm very, very, very proud of all 3 children for their achievements, and they deserve the credit for that.
Well,
And I'm just thankful to God that I did get my children back in 1992, right after Thanksgiving holidays, but before Christmas holidays, I believe. And I had promised Grandmother Meyer in Chattanooga that I would bring the children to see her as soon as I could. And during this time when the children were away, she turned 90. And the Lutheran Church in Chattanooga designated a certain Sunday as her day. And the social workers would not allow us to take our children to be with their grandmother on her 90th birthday. And we said, well, if the social worker has to be with the children or be with us, fine, let's rent a van and let's all go.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do that either. So they're just, and when my husband died, they did not allow the children to go to the funeral. They did allow them to come to the funeral home, and they did see the body and see some church friends. And I'm also very upset about the way it was handled when I wanted to be the one to tell the children that their father had died and gone to heaven. And they manipulated the situation so that the social worker was there when they got home from school, that was there in the foster home. Although they had put me off, telling me to call back later in the day, and when I did, the social worker was already on her way, but I was not allowed to go there. The only concession was that I could be the one to tell them on the phone. So I'm very, very unhappy with how the social worker system works or worked in Texas.
Were you and my father, separated when he passed away?
I was at a women's crisis center on recommendation of his psychiatrist because he had been threatening my life. During the last few weeks of his life, he did carry on his employment responsibilities normally, but he was very upset about the possibility of the United States going to war with a Muslim country.
With Iraq?
Yes. I think they called it Desert Storm.
Desert Storm, yeah.
That was in January 1991.
Well,
My husband died on the deadline date, and the war started the next day.
It's interesting. I went to, by the grace of God, a lot of prayer, I got accepted to Texas A&M, August 2001, and then the very next month, what happened, September 2001, we all know what happened in September 2001, the World Trade Center attack and the Pentagon and the attempt on the White House. And then, I prayed about it for a year. I was in the Corps Cadets, remember that, and I signed an enlistment agreement, and the U.S. Army gave me the scholarship because my grades were good at Texas A&M. My grades were good enough. Not all cadets got the Army scholarship because their grades were not as good as mine. And, so I got the Army scholarship, and I was in the Army Reserves for 2.5 years, and that was tough. I'm not going to lie. Being a contract cadet in the in the Corps Cadets at Texas A&M, being an Army ROTC. It was demanding. No time for a girlfriend or anything like that. All your weekends are taken away. It's all training, which is, in the grand calculus of the universe, that was probably the best thing for me, keep me out of trouble, right? But then commissioned as an officer, and I was active duty for 4.5 years as an officer. I went to Iraq once for 1 year. Now, Fob Grizzly, about 10 miles northeast of Baghdad. And then there's some things that happened at Fob Grizzly, but it's not really important for this interview. But then I do remember we redeployed to Baghdad Victory Base. Went to Camp Cropper. I do remember I was the intel officer for the detainee facility, and I got to meet the former regime. Probably the same exact folks I guess my father was worried about. They're all locked up, but I got to see Saddam's half brother.
Well, your father was an ordained minister who had a seminary degree. He was interested in spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was also very interested in interfaith dialogue with Muslims, and for that reason he studied Islam. And he understood jihad 10 years. 1991 was 10 years, when he died, was 10 years before 9/11, right?
I will say this about Camp Cropper. I did get a request from a high-ranking person in the facility, or the high-ranking detainee. They wanted to study the Bible. They asked for a copy of the Bible. It was a request, so I made sure it got done. I got them a copy of the Bible in Arabic. That's as far as I'm going to go into that, but I did my part, spread the gospel.
And I'm trying to do my part. I'm planning to go overseas and teach at a Bible college at age 81, and I hope to do that as long as my brain works well enough to teach, and as long as my body works well enough for me to live overseas. So we'll see. Thank you again for inviting me to talk about this. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing that happened to us when our children were taken. My husband and I worked together, writing many, 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 many letters to congressmen and senators and anybody we thought would listen.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because family stories are rarely simple. And I think it's also important to hear other people's perspectives. Other people's perspectives matter. And I think it's wise to try to listen to the story from a non-judgmental perspective. And I think it's important to be able to take the perspective, take the issue, imagine it as a hologram, and be able to walk around the entire issue and be able to see it from different sides. I think that it helps with understanding, and I think to be able to do that requires listening and being mindful, non-judgmental, and just a little empathetic.
Well, thank you again for giving me this opportunity to talk about those very unhappy years. And I do want to say that my husband and I were in court together to get our children back. And I know my husband went to heaven because he trusted Jesus and the blood of Jesus, not his own merit. But I'm sorry that he died brokenhearted because the children had not been returned. And they had been told that they would not see their parents again until they were 18. I remember at one of the last visits, your little brother did an art drawing and he put 18 on it because that's what he was thinking about. that he wouldn't see his parents again until he was 18. And I'm happy that turned out to be false.
Amen. Well,
The children, you and your siblings were, your older sibling was 10, you were 9, and your younger brother was 7 when your father died. And after foster care, all 3 children came back saying they did not remember their father at all.
no, I remember things.
Some
Not as much as,
Some of their memories have come back,
yeah.
but I felt like that in addition to everything else, the children had been brainwashed while they were gone. And that was heartbreaking all over again. So it's a heartbreaking story for me, but I'm happy that it had a happy ending.
No, well, thank you for sharing your perspective. Thank you for sharing your story with me. I know it's not easy, and I want you to know I love you and I forgive you for everything. And I want us to. We can't control the past, but we can't control the script of what's already been written. But we can control what's
Future.
the next chapter. We can decide how the next chapter is going to look.
And I love you. I've always
I love
loved
you
you and your siblings. And as you said, I forgive all of
Yeah.
you for anything that shouldn't have happened.
Thank
And
you
I'm
for
happy
that.
to hear about your forgiveness for me, because I'm sure I didn't do everything right, even though my intentions were good. I was very tired at times.
I know. Things were different. Okay, well, God bless you, and thank you for coming on my podcast. It was very meaningful, very, very good discussion.
God bless you too.